Welcome to the Mom as Well podcast, where we are digging deep into the gifts and the gaps of foster and adoptive parenting. I'm Tara Hutton, and I'm glad you're here.
Mama's Well.
Yes, she is. Well, it's a beautiful spring morning where I'm at, and which is so welcomed. I love this time of year. The pollen, the pine pollen has almost stopped a fallen. I say, when's the pollen going to stop a fallen? That's what I say around my house all the time. But it's almost gone. And so we've been enjoying some back porch time, outside time. I hope you are getting outside too. Today, we're going to talk about something we haven't really ever mentioned on the Mom as Well podcast before, and that is international adoption. And although I have a dear friend who has adopted, a couple of dear friends that have adopted internationally, I have never had a guest on that has done that. And today's guest, we met in the coolest way. She is actually a professor, a doctor of physical therapy, but she's also adoptive mom. And she reached out to the agency that I'm a part of and was asking she's writing a book, and she wanted to talk to other foster and adoptive parents about their experiences. And so my agency put her in contact with me. And from the first moment that we spoke, we had this instant connection. And you'll probably see why when you meet her. We have a lot of things in common, but the most important thing is that our husbands have the same name. So I'd like to introduce you to have quickly become a dear friend of mine, Dr. Jennifer Bogardus. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for you had to drive quite a ways to get here, so thank you for that.
Oh, it was peaceful.
Yes. Well, good. So, I want you to share a little bit. You know, our first conversation was over the phone. Mm-hmm. And first conversation was in an email. You had sent an email and kind of just telling me a little bit about your story. Mm-hmm. And then we didn't talk for a little while because we had the big freeze.
Oh, right. That's right.
It was like, so this is how new our relationship is, just since the big freeze. Mm-hmm. But we had a phone conversation where we just immediately, we connected on some things that were deep, you know? So you were reaching out, you wanted to talk to other foster and adoptive parents about their experiences because you're writing a book. Mm-hmm. Let's hold that for a second because I want them to know more about you than that. So will you start with what you're doing, your family, your husband, your career? Introduce yourself.
Okay. So my husband, Kyle, and we've been married for almost 20 years, and we have 5 children. Okay. So we have 3 biological boys, and they range in age they are 13, almost 12, and 7. And then we have 2 children who we adopted from China, and they are 7 and 5. And so we kind of live out near Fulshire, and we have been in Texas for only 6 years. So we grew up in the Northeast where it was cold, and we both really enjoy the warm a lot.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So as far as my career goes, which all kind of started prior to when we adopted, I'm a physical therapist, so I'm a licensed physical therapist. And I spent lots and lots of years treating patients, and then decided to transition into academia. And when I did that, I started my PhD, and I finished that in 2019. Mm-hmm. And so I teach as a tenure track professor at Texas Women's University in Houston. Mm-hmm. And the content that I teach is mostly their psychological aspects of rehab. So I do a lot of work in terms of psychological abstract concepts like grit and confidence and things that have to do with mental health and mental illness and mental wellness also. So I really, really enjoy that part of my work.
I didn't even know that the mental part, I should have known that, but I hadn't thought about the mental piece connected to to physical therapy. You know,
Yeah.
like, can you just elaborate on that a little bit more? Like,
Sure.
I love that word grit. Use
Yeah.
the word grit and talk about that, like how you would.
Well,
how you're
so interestingly, I started out wanting to study grit, and I couldn't get any dissertation members to be on board with that concept because it was too challenging to study. It wasn't objective enough.
I wonder if Brene Brown had that same problem. Like she said,
She
I
doesn't-
want to study shame.
She doesn't
Do you
anymore.
think anybody said that?
I'm sure she ran into some barriers to begin with, but I'm sure she doesn't now.
Yeah, well, we know that. Yeah.
So I couldn't get anybody on board with that idea, which is what led into mental health study, which has become really one of my research tracks. But in studying that, I actually began studying that at the same time that we brought our daughter home, which correlated very deeply with some things that I was experiencing when we brought her home. And so that has led to a complete change in the way that I teach and how I teach in terms of physical therapy. So when I went to PT school, it was all very objective, and it was very much about understanding the concreteness of the physical body and how it worked, and then what we could do to help facilitate healing from a physical aspect. And now, slowly, science is emerging to understand that we can't just treat someone's physical body without treating their emotional, spiritual pieces, because those things are so intimately correlated that if we separate them out, true healing just doesn't happen, and sustained healing doesn't happen. So although I would say that's not the universal thought in terms of medicine yet, that is emerging. So I try to bring that to my students so that their mind is more open when they go out to the clinic. I don't want them to just treat a knee, I want them to treat a person.
Yeah.
And the things that contribute, when that person has pain in their knee, what that affects in terms of their interactions with their spouse and their ability to work and how that makes them feel, and how all of those things then contribute to how they heal.
Yeah. You know what? People who know me intimately, and maybe even people who've been listening for a while, can just after what you just said, could probably easily see why I said we connected so quickly. Because I am at that place in my journey of recognizing how much that emotional piece affects our health and wellness, disease, and just how we function in relationship and all of those things. And so I didn't say this at first, but I want to today, and you've already agreed, so you're stuck.
Happily.
But we're going to do a 2-part series here, because I want to focus in on the international adoption, the mom piece of your life, and I also want to focus in on that professional piece, because I think that you speak with authority and you can speak with experience to children and to adults as they're healing emotionally, and then how that affects their bodies physically. So that is a great introduction to what we're going to talk about on the second half of this, because that was beautifully said.
Good.
That was, you might have to say that again, because some people might not listen to both in order.
Sure.
So I want to talk about that, because that is so important. So this is you're getting a 2-for-1. I'm getting a 2-for-1, 2-for-1 today. So, okay. So you mentioned briefly about before you got your daughter. So your husband, you have a husband named Kyle. What does he do?
So my husband is a civil engineer, and he runs an office for a large engineering firm here in Texas.
Okay.
And he also is a retired major from the Army Reserve. So he's deployed twice, once in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom and once in support of Operation Enduring Freedom.
Okay.
So they were both year-plus long deployments for him.
Wow.
And for us, I should say for us,
Yeah.
because it felt like for us.
And so you were a single mom at that point.
During the second one, yes. We had
Okay.
2 of the 5. So we had 2 little, they were very young. They were 3
Okay, so the
and
first
1.5.
one, y'all were just the 2 of you.
Yep.
So, okay.
We were
And then-
young.
And you had young kids during that season.
During the
that time.
second one, yeah.
Yeah. How was that for you?
That was one of the most challenging times, I think, in our lives. That was a really long year. And I think, interestingly, that was that definitely was a blessing, in that it taught me that my children are very much reflections of my emotions, because I struggled during that time to kind of keep myself together, and that was deeply reflected in my oldest son and his ability to manage kind of the chaos. You know, my chaos in that case became his chaos.
Yeah.
And that was, I think, the first time that I learned that we connect in this weird, energetic way with our kids, and that floats back and forth.
Yeah.
You know, but it was definitely, that was a really, really challenging time. But
Yeah.
he came home safely, both physically and mentally.
Yeah.
And we're just, I look at him differently every single day
Because
since
of
he came
that.
home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's retired now.
He's retired from
Okay.
the Army. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, I have not had to experience that. Were you weren't in Texas at that time, so were you, did you have family support?
We did. We lived about 4 hours from our
Wow.
immediate family, or from
Yeah.
my immediate family. So, but we had some wonderful friends who held us up during that time,
Yeah.
and just, you know, every weekend helping me with the kids, and every opportunity that they had to help lift us up. It was a really, really, I felt very, very supported during that time, which is what I think has made that challenging experience actually easier than some of the other challenging experiences that we've had in adoption.
Yeah.
The support level was different.
Okay. So
Yeah.
you felt like you had a lot more support.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
do.
Ooh, that might be, because everybody gets military wives.
It's very,
and families.
yes, it's very accepted
Yeah.
that it should, oh my gosh, this should be really
the whole
hard.
country.
The whole country.
We have songs written about it.
Absolutely. And I feel as though there's full recognition of the challenges that a family faces and a soldier faces when they are deployed and when they're serving. So there's a lot of circling around those families and holding them up and building them up during that time. And I felt that. I very much felt that. I think there is similar intensities of challenges when you walk down the path of adoption or fostering, and it's just viewed very differently. I think on a whole, or maybe just not understood as well.
Yeah.
So
Right.
so
Well,
the
it's
support
maybe
is
even I don't know the population numbers, but maybe it is when I was a kid, people you didn't hear much about foster care and adoption. Maybe it's because people didn't talk about it. But I know it has grown.
sure.
And so, whereas the military has been around for a long, long time. So there's
Right.
definitely an awareness factor, I would think.
Yeah,
That's
I
a
would agree.
really interesting point and great to me. Yeah. Okay. So that's Kyle. Then you've got the 3 boys. And then, so tell us, like, what prompted, you didn't have infertility issues.
No.
Okay. So what prompted, because that's sometimes the case, right?
Right.
What was the prompting that was it you, your husband? Was it both of you you're sitting at one night over a glass of wine, like, let's go to China and bring home 2 kids? Or what happened?
Well, my husband has always been super open to having more children. And so I knew that was always on the table. As far as adoption went, I think that seed was planted in me a long time ago. I don't know where
Wow.
the inception came. I can't remember, but I also can't remember a time not thinking that was going to be part of our journey. And I always knew we would go to China. And I don't have a good explanation. I get asked that all the time.
really neat.
But I don't have a good explanation except that it has just always been there. And I knew it would be a girl. So when we started talking about it, after we had our 3rd little guy, we started talking about it mostly in terms of, well, we should have a girl in this house.
Yeah.
And that my husband it took him longer, for sure, to come to the same place in terms of acceptance of, okay, well, let's go adopt, than to just, because like you said, we did not have infertility issues. That wasn't, I had healthy, wonderful, uncomfortable pregnancies.
Yeah.
So he was very open to having more children. He just wasn't sure that was the path that he wanted to walk. And it took him a long time, but I backed off of suggesting it and talking about it, but I will never forget the morning that he literally just came to me one morning before he went to work, and he said, I just want you to know I'm in. And I didn't even know what he was talking about because we hadn't even talked about it in a while. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I'm in. I'm on board. Let's look at the adoption path. And that's it was like, so then I'm a freight train, right? I got the green light. So
I
then
got
was
that
like
from you. You're ready to go. You're something comes to you and you're like, I can do this. I can make this happen.
It feels very intense and immediate. Yeah.
So I love it because I have it. Another connection. We have 3 boys too, by the way. I mean, if you're not kept picking up on all of these little subtleties. Wow. It's funny because my husband was the one in our story that would always say, we need a girl and we're going to get one from China.
Oh, really?
Yes. And I think I've shared this on the podcast before, but I was not open to adoption and I had a deep fear, and this is very exposing, but a really deep fear that I wouldn't be able to love another person's child like I loved my boys. And that scared me. And so obviously that was not, obviously that's not true. And then obviously it wasn't in their cards because we wound up with 2 girls. So you know that.
Yeah.
But okay, so he comes to you, he says you're in. Okay, I have no idea other than there's like a large amount. I've seen my friend's box full of papers that it required to adopt their children. So what happened? What'd you do? What's the steps?
Yeah.
And what'd you say when he said that? He says, I'm in. You say, what are you talking about?
I just started to cry. It was just sort of an amazing connection. I mean, he is the softest, kindest, warmest, most patient individual I've ever met in my life. So I knew that his capacity to be open to another child in this way was there. But I needed to know, I mean, we are really good partners in everything. And I needed to know that we were both really on the same page with that. Other things like paint colors and puppies and things like that, I tend to move forward pretty fast. And I don't always wait for his complete onboardness, but we needed to be really a team. And so we just started to investigate all the options in terms of fostering to adopt and domestic adoption here. I think we knew at the time we really didn't want a baby. Okay. I kind of felt done with that tiny phase. And then we looked at international adoption, and ultimately we made the decision to go the international adoption route. And I'll be totally vulnerable about this. My biggest driver in that direction was that I had a very deep fear of having family connected to our adopted child here. That's
a very real fear.
Yes, and it's hard to say out loud because I know that I could probably come to the place where that could be a more comfortable thing for me, but that fear was super big in this decision, and I was just so afraid of what that piece would look like. And so that was what kind of pushed us towards and that this idea had always been in my head. So
thanks for sharing that, because I think and you and I have talked about this before, but sometimes, especially maybe like in some Facebook groups and things like that, when you express those fears, like maybe like the one I just expressed, like I'm afraid I won't be able to love another person's child, or I'm afraid I won't be able to handle the birth family relationship well, or whatever. Like, whether we say that, we all experience fear around this topic. Yeah. And I want to always create a place to say those,
Well, and I appreciate that you do that, because I think one of the things that had brought me to you, which was that I wanted to write this book, was the feeling, my perception, that of the adoption triad, that the adoptive parents struggle, I think, to be understood or accepted that their part is hard too. I think there's in the adoption community, which is small, right, and foster community, I think there is great acceptance of this is a really hard situation for the child, and it certainly is. And this is a really hard situation for birth families that are struggling, or in the case of international adoption, birth families who abandon their children because they feel they don't have any other option. I think we recognize that struggle is real, but I think there is some sense that as adoptive parents, if we're choosing this path, that it's because we have the resources both emotionally and financially and logistically to do it. So from our end,
Yeah. Put on your big,
put on
your big girl pants.
That's right.
Yeah.
Pull them up and they're,
Yeah.
you should be all right.
Right.
And that's just not how it works.
It's not how it works. And so, and I think that possibly the biggest gift I've been able to give myself is compassion around that, is recognizing, yeah, you know what? This is hard.
Yeah.
You know, I've said a couple of times, there's been moments in my journey that has literally feel like, we watched Dances with Wolves the other day. It was such a great movie, but as if my whole body was being scalped, like just the skin being ripped off my arms, the excruciating pain. And to address our own pain is not to not address someone else's.
Right.
It's not an either or. It's and both.
Yes.
Like this is a painful and beautiful scenario, but it is painful. And so I loved, that is where our first connection, you know, what we talked about is the just how hard it had been for us. And it was beautiful. And, you know, that may not be something that you can post on Facebook.
Yeah.
But hopefully you can find another friend that can be there with you in that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's been awesome. So where did we leave off? You were go from there. I don't remember, but I think people are following. I'm following.
Okay.
This is good.
Kyle said go, and I said,
okay.
How fast can I go? So. The process of international adoption includes a tremendous amount of paperwork. Like I used to go through the paperwork thinking, you know, I can manage this because I'm in academia and I do research, right? So I'm used to doing a lot of this stuff. But if you're not used to doing it, it's a tremendous amount of steps, and you're dealing with two governments and two governments saying that you are acceptable, and that just that's a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of energy and a lot of FedEx going on.
Yeah.
But as you're doing that and as you're preparing your dossier for China, you're also starting to be considered for children. And I think one of the weirdest things that we had to do was to fill out paperwork that said what medical needs we would be open to. And so the China program is largely a medical needs program. So if you're going to adopt from China, you're not going into it adopting a fully healthy child in terms of physical health. Okay. It's just not. Most of those children are adopted domestically. So the large need and ability to adopt is through the medical needs program. And there's a huge spectrum. I mean, this could be that they have they have a mole on their face that needs to be removed, all the way to some very severe medical conditions, which is where our path led us. But because I'm a PT, I thought, well, I can do anything musculoskeletal. Like a club foot, I'm in. A missing finger, got it. Like I could do any of those things. But this list has over hundreds of diagnoses on it. And even as a healthcare provider, things that I had never even heard of before. And so as a couple, you have to sit there and decide for your family what is okay and what's not. And it's just a really disconcerting process to think that you are saying no to some children and yes to some children. It's just a hard, weird place to be in. But on the other hand, we're looking at these three boys who are dragging us all over the place, just because they're taking on life, right?
Athletic and doing sports,
right?
And
thinking and considering how we give to all of them. So we had decided we would be okay with a minor medical need. And then one morning having coffee, I found Mia's picture on an advocacy blog, and she had Mia as our daughter, and she had a family who was coming to get her who had, for whatever reason, decided they couldn't do it. And so they were advocating for her because she had multiple medical needs, and that makes her, quote unquote, harder to adopt. So when I contacted our social worker, she immediately said, Jen, this is not a case that I would have brought to you based on
your paperwork.
I said, I know, but I just need to know about her. And so there's Yeah, that was challenging. And because I do know some medical background, when I read her file, when they sent me her file, I thought, oh my gosh, this is not where we're meant to go. And yet I just kept getting tugged and tugged and tugged back to her. So ultimately we decided that she was the one and we were going to go get her. And I'm happy to share the medical needs that we knew of was that she had a congenital heart disease, that she had already had one open heart surgery, that she most likely would need another, if not more than one, that there was a possibility that they would not be able to fix her heart when we brought her back, and we wouldn't know that until she had medical testing back here. And so we went to get her. And I mean,
how long was that process from Kyle says I'm in to you're booking airfare? Do you know?
Well,
remember?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Because typically international adoptions at that time were taking about 15 months.
Okay.
But I expedited hers.
Of course you did.
I went through what's called a medical expedite process and pushed and pushed and pushed. And so from start to finish, she was home in 10 months.
Wow.
But the blessing of that story is that she was only home for 4 months before she needed emergent open heart surgery to save her life. So
wow, had your gifted push.
So my Kyle jokes about how he's like, oh, those social workers must have seen your phone number and they were like, oh my gosh, don't answer the phone.
Yeah.
But in the end, I still feel good about the push.
That is a really I'm not going to look at my husband over there behind the cameras because I am a lot like you in that way. When I decide, and you just everybody needs to step back.
Yeah.
But I really think, and that's been something that I've struggled with throughout my life, feeling a little bit shame about.
Me too.
And I'm recognizing it as the gift that it is right now, and listening to your story and going, yes. And he's also, my husband's also the one that'll say, if anything ever goes down, like if I ever get sick, I want you there. I want you to be the one beside me, asking the questions, pushing for what I need. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We all want that when it's so Mia needed that. You know, what a gift. And honestly, all of these kids that come into care through foster care, adoption, whatever, really need an advocate like that.
They do.
Like somebody's got to push for them. And so kudos, Mama.
Well, thanks.
You got it. Okay, so you get Mia home 4 months later. Okay, what happened?
Yeah. That whole process is so consuming. I remember, so I'm good at that, right?
Yeah.
I am good at full-blown energy I could put all my energy into her. And for me, that was creating love for her and advocating for her.
Yeah.
And I was super excited to go. I mean, we got on that plane like you were going to the hospital to deliver your first baby. It was really, I mean, it was so exciting.
Had you ever been to China?
Never to China. Yeah. And remember, unlike foster care and adoption, you never meet the child. We had gotten 2 photos of her. That whole time, that's all we ever saw. Yeah. And so you have no idea what this child is really like or really what is medically going on, because the Chinese documents get translated a little differently, and there's all kinds of background stuff
I hadn't
there.
thought about that.
So we get on a plane, we go to China. I will never forget we flew into Shanghai, which is an enormous airport and extremely overwhelming. And we get there, you get picked up by a guide. You have to exchange your money because you give a cash donation to the orphanage the day that you get there, that your child comes into your care. And so I'm sure that's shifting now, but at the time you traveled with cash, a large amount of cash, which is a weird thing to do. The whole thing just feels different. A
little bit weird,
than what we would normally experience. Yeah. And so anyway, we're jet lagged and we're all screwed up and we're super excited. And we go to this really grungy little building, and she's there, but we're not allowed to see her because we haven't paid yet. Oh. So we go through the process, and there are 2 or 3 other families in the room also meeting their child for the first time, and they bring her to us, And she is the tiniest little thing I've ever seen in my life.
How old was she?
She was 3. She had just turned 3. Her hair was cut short like a boy because they keep their hair very short because of caring for it.
Yeah.
And she had thrown up all over her dress because she'd never been in a car. Oh. And so she smelled terrible. Oh. And she thought we were great because we had snacks, which is what they had told us to bring. And so she was fine while we were feeding her snacks. But as soon as her nanny walked away, everything changed, and rightfully so. We had sort of been prepared when we went over that she might reject my husband because she had never been around a man ever. Wow. She had only been cared for by women. And so the expectation, and what usually happens, is that they'll latch on to mom because she's more familiar and really reject dad. But our situation was completely opposite. Okay. So she very firmly and intensely rejected me and would only allow my husband to take care of her while we were in China. Wow. Which was really hard for me.
Oh, I can't even, rejection's hard for anybody. Yeah. And I have a place there that feels that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And so here you are, you've prepared for 10 months or 10 months. You've flown across the world. You've paid a bunch of cash.
Yeah.
And now she doesn't want anything to do with you.
Nothing. I mean, not just won't let me near her. I mean, violently tantruming if I go anywhere near her.
Wow. What did you, were you just...
I was just heartbroken. Yeah. I really was just heartbroken. That was a really, really hard 2 weeks. So you spend 2 weeks in country when you're adopting in China, a week in where the child's birthplace is, and then a week in Guangzhou, which is where the U.S. consulate is. And that's how you formalize all your paperwork.
Okay.
So you're there for 15 days, kind of start to finish.
Wow.
So I'm away from my other children, which is really hard.
Sure.
And I'm here with our new child who wants nothing to do with me, like biting, kicking, screaming, spitting at me. Yeah. Just really hurt.
Yeah.
And both of us really hurt. And so we get her back home, and home was equally as challenging. And so, but then we started to layer on top her medical things that were going on, and as we're having her tested, we have new medical things that we didn't know existed. Big things like, oh, did you know her right lung doesn't function?
Yeah.
That just wasn't in her paperwork.
Wow. Yeah.
So it was a really, really challenging transition, and she settled out of that way faster than I did in terms of her connection with me. But my attachment to her, which is super hard for me to say out loud, has been one of the greatest struggles of my entire life.
Yeah, I feel that. Because you long for that. And then, and this is not to blame them. No, this is real. I like it. I don't like that it's hard, because I understand it, but I like that you can express it. Attachment is something that I think I've said this a couple of times, but it's something I didn't realize. I never even heard the word, but all that is rooted in that is feels like it's like the cornerstone. And I didn't have a good attachment. And so when you step into something like that, it's hard. You okay?
I am.
Yeah.
I am. And I have spent, she will be home for 4 years in June. And the one grace that I am learning to give myself is that it's not lack of effort on my part in terms of working towards a better attachment with her. And I love her very, very deeply. But connecting with her as my daughter and feeling that warmth that I really want to feel with her on a consistent basis is really hard. And some of that is stuff that I have to work on and
Yeah.
I have to figure out. And some of it is stuff that she's going to have to figure out. And she's
Yeah.
little, you know,
Yeah.
it will take her time to
Yeah.
be able to do that. And some, you know, the honesty of it is her behaviors are so challenging at times that, you know, it is hard
Yeah.
to work through all of those things. I have tremendous hope about where she and I will be, and I'm committed to that walk with her. But I am finally able to say, like, this was not the beautiful pictures
Yeah.
that everybody
Post on Instagram.
posts on Instagram. This is like the most raw, hard stuff that I have
Yeah.
ever
I
gone
think you
through.
said at some point when we've talked that it's been in many ways harder than both of the deployments that you've gone through when your husband was.
It is.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is. And I think some of that is, as I'm thinking about that, I do feel like there's a difference in support
Yeah.
or understanding, just
Yeah.
general understanding of what you're going through.
Yeah.
And the more people that I talk to and the more that I'm able to be truthful out loud
Yeah.
that this is really hard,
Yeah.
the more that lets go
Yeah.
for me. You
Yeah.
know, the more the hard lets
Yeah.
go. And so I think that having a place like this where you
Yeah.
can be really honest
Yeah.
and talk about that, or, you know, I thought to myself, I need to read about, like, you and I are big readers,
Yeah.
right? I need to read about
Yeah.
this, and I couldn't find the book
Yeah.
that I connected to.
Yeah.
And so I just decided, well, I need to write it then.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so-
And that's what started you
That's
writing the book. And you said
right.
you're writing every day.
Yes. And that has been tremendously healing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Well,
yeah.
you know, I think part of not only is the support there, but part of, and I think this is just the truth of it, but part of expressing our grief is what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
my favorite woman in the world, Dr. Edith Egger, who's a Hungarian, 93 years old now, Hungarian Holocaust survivor. She says all therapy work is grief work. And I love that.
Yeah.
But that's what you're talking about. You're grieving what you thought you were getting. You got something different, and you know that what you're getting is what you got is exactly what you both needed.
Right.
It's just you're in that journey of grief and
Yeah.
coming to acceptance so that you can experience the gift that it really is.
Right.
The gifts and the gaps.
Yes.
And so I think part of being able to express it, what holds us back from being able to express it, is because it can sound like or feel like that us expressing our pain is somehow going to take away from theirs.
Right.
But again, it doesn't have to do that. And actually, the more healthy we get, which comes through expression.
Right.
Another thing Dr. Egger says, she says, the opposite of depression is expression. Right? So
Yeah.
if we don't get it out
Right.
and we hold it in, we become depressed.
Right.
Right? So we have to express. And there's safe places to express.
Right. Well, and I can share with you that the lack of expression on my end for the first 6 months that we were home, of course, I was not going to tell anybody that this felt so awful inside me. That, I mean, it just felt so ugly, that all of those feelings that, and I do think when you have biological children and then you've adopted, you have this different experience of parenting. And my experience of parenting my sons was amazing. It is amazing.
Yeah.
I had not ever felt disconnected from them. There is pure joy in that experience. And so when this challenging experience started for me, that felt awful, that I couldn't just find joy in being her mom the way that I thought that I would. I just thought it would be automatic. The same way it was when they laid all 3 boys on my chest, like little clones of one another.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't the same.
Yeah, because that didn't happen for Mia.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
I didn't have that same time with her. We didn't have that same bonding. And I needed to get to her in a different way. But I'm just starting to figure that out and accept that. And because in the beginning, I suppressed that so much because I just thought I was a horrible human being for feeling that way, that became depression. And in a very real physical and psychological way for me, and in a way that I hadn't ever experienced before. And you certainly can't connect with someone else well when you are so unhealthy yourself, right? So I have thankfully worked out of that piece, and I'm on a such better path of getting to her. But I'm still crawling, climbing. Sometimes dragging my feet.
I understand.
I'm working on forward motion all the time, but it's slow.
Well, and that is again the heart of this podcast, is that giving myself permission, simultaneously inviting other people to give themselves permission to nurture themselves. Because when mom is well, all is well.
It's true.
So we have to start here. And it doesn't take away from our children. It actually gives to them. Mia is your gift. Just like my daughter, all my children have been in various forms, this gift to invite me to this deeper place of healing and acceptance and compassion. And we talked about this on the phone the first time we ever talked. And I shared that with you, that I feel like that these hard, when I was being scalped, I'm not going to stay there. I'm going to get to what the heck is this? Dig down, find it.
Right. Like, I know I need to become a better, like she is insisting that I grow in order to get to her.
Yes.
And I didn't have to work so hard with my other three, but I really believe this feeling didn't happen for a long time, but I really believe that when she is challenging me at her hardest, that is an invitation for me to get better and better and better. Now, I can say those words because I'm not in the middle of conflict, right?
Yes.
In the middle of conflict, I have to work really hard to keep my stuff together.
Yeah.
But I couldn't have said those words or felt that even a year ago.
For sure.
I'm in a different place, but it has taken time and will continue to take time.
So, not to leave out your son.
Oh, yeah.
Because all of this, and you went back to China.
Which is what everybody says.
Wow. Why? Okay. So tell us about that. What happened? Where did this come?
Truly, we weren't, this wasn't on the radar necessarily, but I do remember that, so when you go in country, they often will insist that you visit the orphanage where your children are living, or the foster family where they're living in China, to allow them to say goodbye. Yeah. And so when we visited Mia's orphanage, it was very obvious that she was loved. I mean,
that's wonderful.
Very, very loved. And so I remember Kyle and I leaving there and us both having this conversation about, well, there are 600 children in that orphanage and we're bringing one home. Yeah. Like, there's so much more we could do. And so this little seed was already planted, like, we have the ability to come back. We'll probably come back. Then things were really hard and I was like, I cannot go back. Yeah. But we just happened to find him. And once you adopt, you're connected to all these advocacy pages, right? And he truly just popped up on an advocacy page one day. And there was this conversation, and my husband is like, are you sure? Like, you have not been okay. But we talked about it a lot. We thought about it a lot. And we just decided that we were going to go get this little boy. And he has proven to be a whole different kind of challenge for us. Same process. I expedited his also. His was a medical expedite. It was a 10-month process, start to finish. His medical issues are much more extensive than hers, and some we knew, some we didn't know. He's had a seizure. He has substantial right-sided brain damage. He's had a stroke. He has a very rare form of epilepsy. So he presents like a child who might have autism and MR. There is a very severe cognitive deficit for him. But on paper, I mean, his neurologist has said, I can't believe he's doing what he's doing. He shouldn't. For all intents and purposes, if you looked at his MRI, you would think this child will never feed himself, will never walk, will never talk, and he does all of those things.
Wow.
And he is growing and he's learning and he can sing to you, and there are a lot of behaviors and there are a lot of challenges with a special needs child, but he truly is joy. Like his default is joy. So we are just trying to wrap our brains around that piece.
And you've had him for 2 years?
Not even 2 years. He came home. He came home October 2019, and pandemic began essentially. They shut down China travel in January. So if I had not expedited him, we wouldn't be there yet. We still wouldn't have him. Yeah. So
no more shame on that one. No more shame on that one. Yeah.
If anybody needs to know how to medically expedite a child,
anyone needs to know how to do anything.
No.
But I'm not going to give him your email.
I know that paperwork though.
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
So I think the biggest thing for us with our son is that we didn't anticipate the severity of his cognitive needs. So we knew within the first day or so in China that he was not going to ever leave home.
Yeah.
That he would live with us forever, or as long as we were able to care for him. And that was not what we anticipated. So that was just a big change to wrap your heart around, that this child is going to need, it will be dependent upon you for physical and full needs forever. So
wow, I think that's the case probably more often than we know, right? For kids international adoption sometimes.
I think, they tell you to be prepared that it may be different than what things look like on paper, but
it was way different.
It was way different.
In both cases.
Both cases,
way different.
Both cases.
Yeah. The grief process was I mean, obviously you're still in that process moving through it, but was probably a little bit less intense because you would already you knew you weren't grieving. The expectations were there now.
Yes,
more so.
I think I sometimes grieve the changes in our lifestyle that I didn't anticipate.
Sure.
Right. The family vacation doesn't look like I would anticipate.
Yeah. You told me about a camping trip that you recently took at spring break that was way different than you had thought. I was pretty impressed that you were taking all 5 of them camping. So that was so cool. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, we speaking of support, we have a group of friends that has really, really rallied behind us. And I don't know if they'd be so good with us saying we were going back again. Like I think they would want us to check in on taking on any more responsibility. But they are being able to travel with other people and to be accepted. I mean, we're a circus, right? We are a straight circus everywhere we go.
Yeah.
And so being able to be just us
it's nice.
is a really big, important piece. And I think that is something that adoptive and foster families struggle with, like the feeling of isolation, because that part's really, really hard.
Yeah, you don't know what you're going to get. Like, I can feel that. You don't know what you're going to get. And you don't want to be surprised when you're in a place that is not going to have what you need or the people around you that you need.
Yeah. Like, I don't like being the star of the show in public, right?
Nobody does.
Right? Exactly. And so since I know that's often how it just will end up, right?
Yeah.
It just is what it is.
Yeah.
You tend to avoid putting yourself in those situations that make you feel crappy and hard. So that becomes very isolating.
Yeah.
And connection we can talk about connection and that importance as far as development goes when we talk later too, but connection feeds everything.
Yeah.
Right. So the time in our lives when we're going through something that is for me, harder than I've ever gone through, and yet my connections have become super small. My world of real security and connections and attachments gets smaller and smaller because nobody wants to invite a family of 5 over with the screaming special needs little guy over for a backyard barbecue. Like, who wants to do that? I get it. I don't judge that at all. But
and then you had the pandemic on top of that. So then it's like no one's really having backyard barbecues.
You're just
home. And if they did, you definitely weren't going to be invited.
You're just home in transition as they call it, and transition is hard.
Even in birth, right?
Yeah. That's right.
Man. Okay, I feel like, we're going to you and I are going to go to lunch.
Okay.
Because I want to take you to this a place that I've never been to, but we're going to go to lunch. And then we're going to come back here. So if we're leaving anything on the table, I think you can't really talk about your professional space in this world without, it's all of you, right? So we'll focus on that, but there's more. I know there's more that's going to, because your personal life and your parenting, it affects how you've treated patients and how you've taught your students. And
I would say it's totally changed the trajectory of my whole professional path. And my daughter is a huge reason for that in a beautiful, wonderful way.
Isn't that so cool?
Yeah. One of the things that I did want to share with you is that in my conversations with other adoptive moms, there's this one mom who also went through international adoption, and it's been very challenging. And one of the things...
Let me just preface. You are in preparation for writing your book. You are interviewing, reaching out across the country, interviewing other foster and adoptive parents, whether international or foster care or whatever. Right. So you are doing you are the next Brene Brown. It's going to be on grit. She loves grit too.
She does. Yeah. She loves all that hard stuff to measure. I think it's fabulous.
Okay, so go ahead.
So one of the things that she said that there were 2 quick things, because we talk about finding the things that are beautiful in all of this hard, and we were discussing that, and she said to me, sometimes it's just so loud that you can't see the beautiful stuff, right? And you have to quiet that. You have to quiet the noise. And we had happened to be talking about both figuratively and literally, like the noise in our lives. And I thought that was so profound, because Mia's very loud. She's very, very loud in general, but she also creates a lot of loudness in I shouldn't say she creates. My relationship with her has created a lot of noise in my head. And once I was able to quiet that, I can see things like, oh, wow, I'm doing heart research. I would never be involved in heart research if it weren't for Mia. Yeah. I'm doing
because Mia has a heart condition.
Right. And some of the paths that I've gone down have been really connected to my connection with her. And so that part.
What a gift.
Yeah. What a gift.
Yeah. Okay. We're coming back for more. Thank you. We're going to go to lunch.
Okay.
And then we're going to come back, and you guys are going to have to wait a whole week to see the next part. But thank you for joining us. I probably don't say this enough. I listen to other podcasts and podcast coach. They say, make sure you're liking and subscribing. Please do that. I don't know exactly what it does, but I know that it gets the word out. So if you will subscribe, leave a comment, that is as helpful to get the word out to other foster and adoptive parents. I know that you've enjoyed today as I have. This is a fabulous resource, and just super connected to her heart. And that's where I'm going. And when we connect with our own hearts, it allows us to connect with the hearts of our children. And that's what we're here to do, right? So join us again next week, and we will see you next time.
Mama's way.